So I kind of fell into it, actually. I went to college at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And when I graduated, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. And a friend of mine, his family was in commercial real estate in Baltimore and had a connection to our company, Goodman Gable Gould. And after a quick introduction, it turns out that I only needed one job interview to secure my my future career choice, and it worked out great.
Interesting. So the first question is, what the heck does a public adjuster do? An insurance public adjuster, public insurance adjuster, whichever the phrase is.
Yes, it's a little bit of a hard concept to understand. It normally takes at least two drinks at the bar with a friend or colleague to fully understand what it is that we do. But in a nutshell, we are advocates for policyholders that have sustained a insured loss. So we help represent their interests and guide them through the insurance adjustment process, both commercial clients and also residential homeowners who have sustained a damage.
Gotcha. And is there a specific area of insurance that you guys adhere to? I mean, I know obviously we're an architecture podcast, so you're in that kind of space, but does it expand to commercial and other structures or things outside of, buildings?
Mostly we focus on first party property insurance claims. So, buildings, dwellings, things like that. We have occasionally from time to time ventured into some marine stuff, yachts and boats, a classic car collection. We're actually doing a claim in California currently for a client who had a collection of vintage automobiles that sustained damage relatively recently. So, we kind of dabble in those areas as well, but our primary focus is first party property insurance.
Do you find that your job for a house is radically different from when it's a commercial structure versus classic cars?
Yes and no. A claim is a claim. A lot of times we're kind of guided by the policy and the coverages that are in place at the time that a loss occurs. So, on a standard, homeowner's residential claim, there are several, buckets of insurance that normally would come into play. Dwelling coverage for the structure of the house, personal property or contents coverage for the belongings of the house, as well as, additional living expenses. So if your home is unfit to live, many times insurance companies cover your temporary expenses for your home and household to reside elsewhere. Commercial, it's similar, building coverage for the structure, business personal property for any, improvements or property inside of the building. And then the key piece there is your business interruption or loss of income is also typically covered under most first party insurance policies. So, we have the expertise to assist in measuring those type of losses as well and making sure that we present our client's claim in a format where the insurance companies are used to seeing it, can digest it, and ultimately pay the claim. And then, using your auto example for the classic cars, it's similar. It depends on what coverages are available for the various vintage automobiles. A lot of times those policies have like a stated value where it's kind of agreed in advance between the parties what the stated value of the item would be. But then it gets down to, well, is it completely destroyed? Can it be fixed? Can it be repaired? What's the kind of gray area between the two positions?
I have a feeling there's a lot of gray area, and some of our questions have to do with that massive gray area when it comes to houses. And I think this next question will be answered throughout the show. Well, so why would someone need a public adjuster or an adjuster at all? And I guess there's also a difference between a public adjuster and adjuster that an insurance company would provide on their own versus, I suppose, possibly not having an adjuster at all.
Right, and that's a great question. There's several different types of adjusters that are out there. There are staff adjusters who work for the insurance company. They work for Nationwide, they work for Allstate, they work for Chubb. They are directly employed by the insurance carrier. Then there are independent adjusters. They might work for various insurance companies. So, like, for example, with what's going on in California currently, there's such a huge influx of claims that a lot of the insurance companies need to bring in outside help to assist them in the volume that they are seeing. So they would reach out to an independent insurance company that might work for Philadelphia and also Farmers and also Nationwide, whatever it might be, and kind of help represent the interests of the insurance company. Where we are different is that we solely represent policyholders. We only work on behalf of the insured, on behalf of the owner. And, in this current environment, when it comes to insurance claims, we find that homeowners need and business owners need to make sure that their interests are being protected, that they know what coverages are available to them. They know what sort of the standard operating procedure is for a claim, because a lot of times if you don't ask, you might not necessarily get 100% of the answer. So, we kind of step into that void to kind of help navigate through and assist in leveling the playing field, right? Because insurance companies hire many different consultants on their side of the ledger to assist them in measuring the loss to the structure, measuring the loss to the business interruption and the loss of income. We do the same on behalf of our clients to make sure that everybody is playing off the same sheet of music and really doing what is owed under the terms and conditions of the policy.
Yeah.
So is it possible for a case to have an adjuster that is hired by the insurance and also a public adjuster, or is there typically only one adjuster?
So every claim that we get involved with, there is an adjuster on the insurance company side of the ledger, either a staff in-house adjuster or an independent adjuster. Yes.
Gotcha.
And a
So
lot
it
of
would make
times,
sense.
and a
Yeah.
lot of times the insurance companies are not unhappy to see us, right? Because they can talk to us professional to professional. We
Yeah.
talk the same language. We have the same lingo. We know generally what the policies cover. And, we as public adjusters handle the majority of the communication with the clients. So a lot of times once we get involved, we are able to talk to the adjuster on the other side, adjuster to adjuster, and then kind of help translate that language or what's going on with the claim to our clients in a much more digestible manner.
Is there a specific time frame in which a client should be bringing a public adjuster in? Like, is it from the beginning? Is there a time where it's too late? You can't bring you guys on board?
For the folks who suffered from the fires in Los Angeles, it's been, wow, time flies. I'm looking at the date.
Months.
It's been a couple of months. Yeah. Is it too late for them to engage with you guys or a public adjuster?
Not necessarily. I mean, we get involved in all different phases of the adjustment. We like to say, the sooner the better, so that we can really kind of help shape the adjustment from the start, help develop the strategy for our clients that kind of meets their needs and goals and expectations. And also it's a matter of, sometimes the process gets a little bit too far down the road. The insurance company gets their perception of the loss, and like we like to say, it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube sometimes once that train has kind of left the station. But that being said, we have gotten involved in claims in all different phases, but the most effective is really when we're getting involved from the early onset.
This is super fascinating. I think thinking about what you've just described is analogous to our profession of architecture and construction and whatnot. What you've described is very similar to a lot of times what an architect's role with the client or an owner's representative role with the client, in that they are they are the bridge between the client and someone else across from the table, and helping those conversations take place. And I like your point about you guys talk to the adjusters, then you talk to the client. I can see where that's a great benefit, because the language, I'm assuming, from adjuster to adjuster, or an architect to contractor, or owner's rep to the professional team, is a certain type of conversation. There's certain terms being used and an efficiency to it. And then I could see where it's a great benefit if it's highly technical, let's say, or not easy for folks to understand, to have somebody as an intermediary, sort of, to then give highlights, let's say, to the client, unless they want the full, deep dive details, I suppose.
Absolutely. I mean, our clients, a lot of them want to be very involved in all the details and minutia of their claim. Some of them just kind of want to get the big picture. But, David, to that point, a lot of times having open conversations with an insurance company might have consequences on your claim, right? You might accidentally stumble into something that could have coverage repercussions, right? Whereas having a
Mm.
sounding board such as a public adjuster like myself and like our company, we can kick things around, we can have conversations, we can weigh options without necessarily the consequences of an insurance company reacting to any and everything that is said and conveyed. Because ultimately, an insurance claim, it's very personal for the homeowner, it's very personal for the business owner, but it's a business transaction. And
Mm-hmm.
in, this day and age, if you're having a multi-million dollar business transaction, you'd be silly not to bring in a professional who has experience in that field to help kind of guide and walk you through that process to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of and that, the transaction is fair for all sides.
Yeah.
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 And I could see also where maybe for some folks, I guess in an ideal world, right, everything would be much more black and white and objective and clear, but it's not really the case. And you used a word that I thought was great, which is I think you said the perception that the insurance company has, which is a great way to describe one of the fundamental issues of all of this is that it's not so black and white, X's and O's or whatever else. There's the perception, and it's the same. I'm just thinking it's the same thing for us in construction.
Or like obtaining building permits and getting drawings reviewed by the city. It's up to interpretation.
Yeah.
The documents are up for interpretation.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. And what you say, but also how you say it makes a really big difference in how in your case the insurance company is understanding the value of what was lost, or in our case the building or whatever it is. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of times in complex losses with structural damage, when there is an architect or an engineer who needs to be brought in, that's, as you guys know, that's very subjective, right? One professional can think that, hey, we can try to save the backside of the building, and the other professional says, no, you can't. Making sure, so making sure that if the insurance company hires an engineer, you got to hire an engineer. If they have an architect, you got to have an architect to kind of help level that playing field and balance the scales, so that it's not just only one-sided or only one side's point of view and perspective is being represented.
So you guys are really like close allies of the clients, sort of like their agent or representative. That's kind of your territory.
100%. Only working for policyholders and business owners throughout the process. Exactly.
Gotcha. So maybe we can structure this next part of the conversation as if, role playing. So I'm a homeowner and I lost in my house in the LA fires, and going sort of back in time, let's imagine it happened just recently. And I've reached out to you and I've said, okay, I sort of understand what a public adjuster does. I understand the value that you bring. I want to engage with you. What the heck do I do next?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I would say is I'm sorry to be meeting you under these circumstances. A lot of times I begin my professional relationship with our clients by offering our apologizing and look, it's you have to be empathetic and understand what people are going through, right? I mean, for us, we do this every single day. It's my job, it's routine. But for our clients who are going through it, it's very emotional, it's very personal. So you have to be able to, understand the empathy and really, have a bedside manner, because you're conveying cold hard facts, but you have to convey it in a way where it's easily digestible and able to be sort of understood and appreciated. So what I would say to you, as if you were to retain us, which would be, hey, from this point forward, we'll handle all the communication with the insurance company, so you can focus on your business and on your family and make sure that you guys you continue operating the way you need to operate. We give formal notification to the insurance company that we are officially involved in the claim and representing your interests. We are licensed as public adjusters in many states, including in the state of California, licensed and regulated. So we'd meet any of those sort of professional notification needs as necessary. And then we'd reach out to the insurance company and we would say, hey, we're involved. What do you guys want to do? What are we thinking here? Now, in the case of the Palisades fires, many of the houses that are totally destroyed, there's not a whole lot to go out and see, right? It's not where we need to meet out there and let's walk the loss together, and I'll point out the floor joists and we'll point out the various elements of the building that are damaged to make sure that it all gets taken into consideration. In a non-total loss, that is certainly something that we would do, is meet the insurance company out there and try to agree on scope as much as possible. Let's replace the roof, let's replace the siding, let's replace whatever it might be. In the wildfires, it's a little bit different, right? We want to see how much coverage that's available. We want to make sure that we're adding value in this process for our clients. If you were unfortunately underinsured by millions of dollars, well, we wouldn't take you on as a potential client because we're not adding any value to this process for you, either from a time standpoint or from a dollars and cents standpoint. So we'd also want to make sure that that logically made sense for you as our client, because it doesn't make sense to get involved in some losses where an insurance company is going to just automatically stroke a check if the client or the homeowner is drastically underinsured. So those are some of the sort of preliminary items that we would sort of look into and investigate, along with finding out, hey, David, where's your family living, right? Do you guys have a stable living situation? Can we help you get in touch with a housing provider who could potentially find you some temporary housing options? And then we would bring that to the insurance company's attention for review and approval. Those are sort of those immediate first steps that we would take when we kind of get involved in a claim.
Gotcha. A bunch of questions popped up. So the first is that, if a client is severely underinsured, and you mentioned it doesn't make sense for you to work with them or them with you, and why would that be the case? And also tied to that, how do you guys get paid? How do you get paid?
Sure. So we're paid, public adjusters are typically paid based on a percentage of the amount that's recovered, so that our interests are aligned with the clients throughout the process. It's not like a lawyer where we're just billing hourly. A lot of times we want to make sure that it's, a percentage so that we are all on the same page. Now, why would someone be underinsured? There could be a multitude of reasons why somebody would theoretically be underinsured. Either they just didn't know how much coverage they needed for their home. They might have a fair plan policy where the maximum that they could have purchased is still not enough to cover the reconstruction costs for their home. So there's many reasons like that, and hopefully an insurance company would acknowledge that a homeowner would be underinsured and wouldn't really put up much of a fight when it came to paying out the policy limits. But the value that we add to the process for our clients is either, like we said, on a dollars and cents standpoint, helping to make sure that you get what you're entitled to under the policy, and also from a time savings standpoint, shouldering the load of a claim. It's burdensome, right? The onus per an insurance policy is on the policyholder to prove their loss to the insurance company. So you need to prove your loss and damage either with a repair estimate or a detailed inventory when it comes to personal property or business personal property, an accounting loss measure for a business that may have sustained an interruption or a suspension. So, those are some of the reasons why, once again, why we help to kind of make sure that these things get on the right track and get viewed the right way.
Yeah. And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I can see where that preliminary understanding of how it's going to play out based on your experience, expertise, and probably also knowledge of the insurance company that the client has, the homeowner, is critical, because you don't want to go too far down in a process and then everyone realized this was a moot point and we couldn't make it work for you. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. Getting up, for us as adjusters, seeing a copy of your insurance policy, as early as possible, seeing what coverages are available, what coverages might be applicable to the loss and damage, are really immensely critical in crafting a strategy for an adjustment of a claim.
So in the case of a total loss, how do you go about documenting the personal belongings of the families? For example, I don't know if people know how much their furnishing was worth total, their clothing, everything that fills a home. How do you go about doing that?
Absolutely. So we work very closely with our clients to help prepare a recreation of everything that has been totally destroyed throughout the house. So over the years, our team has kind of perfected either a memory, we call it a memory jog workbook. So it used to be an actual hard copy, 12 inches thick, bound, 3-ring binder with various tabs. Nowadays, it's an Excel spreadsheet, right? Where we have your sort of normal household items, whether it's, what's in a normal nightstand, a normal medicine cabinet, what's in a utility room, what might be in a butler's pantry, to really help get the thought process and the juices flowing when it comes to remembering what you had, because the dollars are in the details, and if you forget to list something, the insurance company would have no idea it was there. So we need to really make sure that we go through that process very closely with our clients to understand what they had, and then our team would take the first crack at pricing that. We'd say, hey, do you guys normally shop at Nordstrom's? Do you shop at Macy's? Do you shop, what's your sort of go-to, so that we can kind of get a rough price point for it. And then we take the first attempt at pricing those items, make sure that our client is comfortable with what is being reflected, and then we'd send it into the insurance company. Now, in situations where it's not a total loss, where there is still items that are able to be seen, we undertake a physical inventory on behalf of our clients, where anything that's tangible that we can touch, take a picture of a model number, make, serial number, designer, stamp, whatever it might be, to help support the pricing that we're putting forth. We routinely do that for our clients in non-total loss situations.
Wow, that's incredible amount of work.
It is.
I cannot imagine.
I think anybody listening to this episode should start a spreadsheet now of anything that they own and they're buying.
Yeah, you'll be done in a year. How long does it typically take for? I guess it depends on the scale of the loss, really. But I don't know. Let's say kind of typical 2,000, 3,000 square foot house, that kind of scale. Like how long does it take for a person or a family to fill out that spreadsheet and get it to a point to where now it's going to be sent to the insurance company?
It's so variable, David. It really depends. Look, people have sometimes have an understanding of, oh, well, if I'm hiring a public adjuster, I don't need to do anything. Well, we shoulder a lot of that load, but there is still input that is needed from our clients, right? We would have had no idea what your house was like before the fire took it, right? So the only way that we could know is either from you guys, either photos or receipts or documents or things like that. And it depends, a recreation takes time. We normally give our clients homework. It's like, hey, by Friday, if you could get us, the kids' rooms, your room, and the laundry room, that would be great. Right, because we want to bite it off in small bites, right? It's too overwhelming to think you can put everything together, in a short amount of time. Things get right. I mean, things get rushed, things get missed. People just kind of lose their minds because it's very overwhelming to do. So, small bites we found is the way to go, and the most effective way to kind of, like we said, give some homework where it's not overwhelming. We're gonna go at your pace. We're not going to try to bang it on your door every day, but we're here when you're ready to send us the first batch. We'll take a look at it. Now, in a non-total loss situation where we're undertaking the physical inventory for our clients, within a few weeks, we'll have that, transcribed and priced and over to our clients for their initial review.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's the Excel sheet you mentioned, it reminds me on our side, right? One of the first things we do as an architecture office is send clients I would consider a fairly in-depth questionnaire for our space as architects to understand as much as we can about them before we start doing any work. And, sometimes it takes them a week, sometimes it takes a few weeks or longer. And we're always balancing the threshold and trying to figure out how do we gain as much information as possible, but not overwhelm them. And when I think about the idea of recreating mentally and cataloging an entire house that used to exist or partially exist, that's several degrees above, what we have in our now what I would consider flimsy questionnaire. It's quite astonishing. So when you were saying that in the case where a house is partially destroyed, which was different than a lot of the houses in the Palisades or in Los Angeles, and you have someone go out there to, I guess, basically inspect the house. So it sounds like your team, I don't know if it's in-house or it's through consultants, but you have a wide variety of dedicated experts in very specific things. I'm thinking, I don't know if they would be called, but like something like a building inspector versus someone who's able to price, an object or an article of clothing. Or how is that done? Is that do you have like in-house construction experts, or do you work with, I don't know, local contractors? Is it a different company?
Sure. No, great question. So, one of the things that kind of separates our company, GGG, from other public adjusters that are out there is that we have a sister company called Atlantic Estimating that strictly helps us with our dwelling and our building repair estimates. So these are building construction experts who utilize the standard insurance company estimating software to help capture the scope and the price associated with returning a building or a home back to the same condition it was in 1 minute prior to the loss taking place, because ultimately that's what you're insured for. So we would, now that doesn't mean that we wouldn't go out and utilize sub bids for specific trades where there's a specialty item. If we have a slate roof, or the house is plaster because it's from back in the day, some of those sort of categories, the software that we utilize is not amazing at capturing the true cost for it. So our building estimators would, go out and obtain a local sub bid from a vendor or from a contractor to help support and give credibility to the numbers that we're putting forth. Similarly, we have a in-house forensic accounting team that handles both the physical inventory of the personal property or the business personal property, but also helps with the accounting from a financial standpoint, loss of income, loss of rents, if it's an apartment building, things like that. All of those team members are basically, in-house via our sister companies, where it's kind of one-stop shopping for our clients. So it's not where it's like, hey, well, Zach's my guy for this and Paul's my guy for that. It's just really one point of contact for our clients so that they know that it's all being handled by the same place.
That makes sense. You were talking about the speed of how all of this happens, and kind of like giving the client, their own time, because every time there is loss, there is grief that needs to happen. So things don't necessarily jump start right away. Do usually insurance give a let's say a due date by which things have to get submitted? Like, is there
especially if they're covering rent,
if they're covering rent or...
Yes, so there are policy requirements as far as timing for various elements of the adjustment. And normally in a standard adjustment, there's various phases, right? There's the initial sort of mitigation triage phase if needed, right? So policyholders have a duty to mitigate their loss and damage and prevent further damage or destruction. So in a non-total loss situation, that might involve, having a restoration company board up the house or the building to make sure nobody gets in, set up drying equipment, remove wet or smoke damaged or fire damaged building materials to help stabilize the property and prevent it from getting any worse. Then, the next stage would be sort of the adjustment phase, where the insurance company and their team come out, we come out with our team to start measuring the extent of the loss and damage. And ultimately, what gets established is a period of restoration for the claim that starts the date of the loss and ends of when the property should be restored, using due diligence and dispatch, taking into consideration, permitting timelines, time frame to draft, plans or drawings for permitting purposes. All of that gets kind of baked into the cake. And when we're talking about the Los Angeles and Palisades fire families as well, those timelines are significantly expanded because of the availability of contractors, the availability of materials. All of that gets factored into the equation.
How often is it that the discrepancy between your guys' valuation of what was lost versus the insurance companies is close, or is so far off that it takes a lot of work to find a middle ground?
So in an ideal world, I think the starting points would be a lot closer.
Sure.
Ideally, but look, it's we like to tell our clients, the nicest adjusters who could, come to your house or come to your business and smile and give you the thumbs up and tell you everything's going to be okay, could give you the lowest possible starting points. And the biggest curmudgeon who doesn't even look you in the eye or shake your hand could give you the best number. So it's so variable and it's so subjective. But I would say, normally there is a healthy delta between the way that we view the claim for our clients and the way the insurance company does. The insurance companies are bound by the terms and conditions of the policy, but they're looking to pay, the bare minimum to meet their obligation under the policy. Whereas our clients are looking to get made whole for the full extent of the loss and damage that was sustained to the property. So I had a client in my office earlier today, and they had a slate roof that was damaged in a fire. Well, we went out and got a quote for for the exact same type of roofing material that was damaged, and it cost $150,000, right? The insurance company went to a different roofer and who quoted a like kind and quality product. It wasn't the same, it wasn't
Yeah.
exact, and
Hmm.
there's a six-figure discrepancy between how much the same
Wow.
roof is going to cost to be replaced.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's items like that, getting back to what you were saying about it being subjective, two people looking at the same property and having two different opinions about it, and we're here to kind of help bang the drum and make the argument as far as, hey, look, we had this slate before the loss. The policy says we're entitled to the same slate after the loss, guys. We understand
Yeah.
it might not be as inexpensive as a different type of material, but you insured this house with this roof, and now's the time where you need to pay for it because it got there's no dispute that it got damaged as a result of a fire.
Is that conversation made easier or more difficult based on the specific adjuster you are working with, or is it more about the company as a whole, the insurance company?
Both. I mean, the insurance industry is kind of a small industry. You see a lot of the same faces on a lot of the same claims over and over again. So, you have built up credibility with the other side to know that, hey, Zach's not blowing smoke. Zach's a straight shooter, and we can kind of get things done together. Some insurance companies are more, I would say, more open-minded when it comes
Hmm.
to how they view losses and how they pay out claims. I mean, claims in general for an insurance company is the redheaded stepchild, right? I mean, it's all about
Hmm.
bringing in premiums, collecting those, bringing in new customers, and paying out as little as possible. And there's your profit margin, right? So it's always a sort of situation where it depends on how you view the claim. And we used to, when I first started in this business 20 years ago, there were certain insurance companies, when you would see them on a loss, you'd be like, okay, this one's going to go really smooth and really well. And that's really just not the case anymore.
Is and talking about the valuation, or like the slate roof example, right? And that is one specific thing, but of course you multiply that by, I don't know, 1,000, and that outlines all the line items of a house. Um, the other thing that happens, of course, as you know, is for the same exact item, if you get a price from three different subs, you can potentially get wildly different numbers, right? The same thing if you go to a contractor, and I'm going to a contractor for a rebuild or any kind of project. Three contractors can bid the same set of plans and say, I can build the same quality, and their numbers will be different by a magnitude of like 2x or 3x. And of course, as professionals, I know where the kind of bottom edge would be of contractor that you want to avoid. And I know when someone's like on the higher end, that is probably just being more expensive because they're more expensive. How the heck do you prove that to an insurance company and say, look, I understand you found someone who's going to do it for, build a house for $300 a square foot in an LA hillside. I know that's not possible because I've spoken with, how do you prove that that's not feasible?
So how our sort of standard operating procedure is that we write our own estimate, right? So we're not beholden to the three contractors putting together their three different set of bids that are wildly inconsistent, right? So our strategy is to present our client's claim based on the estimate that we helped develop, that we put forth, that is putting them back to the same condition it was in, no better, no worse, no upgraded cabinets, no upgraded roofing material, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's what you had, right? That's the basis for the policy. That's the basis for the settlement of the claim. Now, if there's a specialty item like we were talking about the roof, sure, you could get a sub bid, and that's part of the dispute that we have now is their roofer is saying one thing, our roofer is saying another, right? Kind of finding middle ground with an insurance company is important, right? Because ultimately it comes down to what are the client's goals, right? If their goal is it's like, hey Zach, I need X amount in order to make this number work. I don't care how you get there, so be it, right? It's kind of whatever it takes to get the job done in many respects is ultimately, what it takes. So whether that insurance company agrees to include the roof or if they want to, utilize a different area of difference that we might have between the two estimates, kind of help bridge that gap, so be it. But, at the end of the day, it's really, what are our clients' goals? What do we need to achieve in order to make this a successful outcome? And we just kind of work whatever angles we have available to us to achieve those goals.
Talking about upgrades for a second, thinking about the LA fires and people who completely lost their homes and have to rebuild. A lot of those houses were built, let's say, before the 80s, right? So foundations were not up to code, there's probably no sprinklers in the house, and they want to rebuild. Those new code upgrades will have to be part of the new project. How can you get insurance to cover for the cost of those new systems and construction updates to be part of the claim?
Great question. So there is a separate coverage that could be purchased by homeowners or business owners that would cover, that's basically called ordinance and law coverage. That would cover any code upgrades that are required to be complied with in order to meet the current building code. Because your base building or dwelling coverage typically does not cover those type of improvements. It returns you to the same condition you were in, no better, no worse. So if you didn't have a sprinkler system, but it's required, too bad. Now, if you have code coverage, then the insurance company would be obligated to comply with those codes, assuming that basically typically it's two sort of thresholds that need to be met. Is the requirement being mandated by the authority having jurisdiction over the repair process? And is it actually being incurred by the homeowner or the business owner? And typically, if those two thresholds are met, then the insurance company would consider including those elements as part of the claim. Now, it's all very, very subjective. There's details that would need to be worked out. What portion of the building or property is it? What does the actual code coverage say? Because there's different forms that say different things. But generally, that's sort of the spirit of your code coverage.
Could that code coverage be purchased now that people have lost their home, but they're thinking of rebuilding, or is it kind of too late?
Well, you could purchase it moving forward once your house is rebuilt, but retroactively, that's typically a no-go, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
That'd be nice if it was, though.
That would be great. That would be great. Sure.
It wouldn't make any sense for the insurance companies.
Yeah, I probably cannot work in insurance field, right? But another question that popped into my mind is that, so a lot of, the debate right now in LA is people thinking of rebuilding versus not rebuilding, right? And everybody knows that the cost of construction is just, X number of times what it was when their original house was built. So if the cost of rebuilding exceeds the amount that the policy limit is there any way to go beyond that? Or is the homeowner, have to pay out of pocket to rebuild because the costs are just way more nowadays?
So typically you are really bound by the coverage that was in place at the time of the loss. Now, many policies do have some supplemental coverages that could theoretically be utilized in this sort of event. Debris removal, in many cases, is an additional coverage over and above your base dwelling limit that could be utilized to assist and cover some of the costs associated with clearing the lot, getting rid of the debris, hauling it away, etc. A lot of times there's additional coverage for landscaping, which might cover some of the trees, the shrubs, the plants, in addition to your dwelling limit. And then what I would also, advise people to look into is, there's a coverage that's called other structures coverage that applies to structures on the property that are not attached to the main structure, the main dwelling. A driveway would apply, or a patio or a pool, things like that. The other structures coverage might apply to help get you more than just your base dwelling limit. But unfortunately, the adjustment is governed by the coverages that are in place at the time, and the insurance company really isn't going to pay you more than what is in writing at the time of the event.
Gotcha.
So in terms of rebuilding, I think it's easy for everyone to focus on the construction costs because I don't know why. Maybe it's more tangible. The cost of the contractor, the labor, the materials. But what about other things like we highlighted earlier? If you're going to rebuild, and certainly if you're going to rebuild not like for like and make alterations to the previous home in its design or materiality, either a little bit or significantly, you then need to have an architect possibly a designer, engineer, permitting costs. So what about all the soft costs, all the other fees, which can be about 25% of construction costs to get the project done? Are those covered underneath policies typically as well?
Yes, those are typically covered under the dwelling or the building coverage because they are part and parcel of the permanent repairs. You cannot do all of the scope unless you have these plans, these drawings, these items
Yeah.
taken care of first. So, those are factored into many, if not all, insurance settlements where they are applicable. Yes.
And then another detailed question, thinking about it from an architect's perspective, is an architect's fee will vary greatly from one architect to another. And if we talk about it as a percentage of construction cost, not that we're billing as that, but just as a way to talk about it, I think if you Google like an architect's 10 to 12% of construction cost, something around that ballpark, but so again, how do you guys see that fee you typically being? How do you calculate it? And then also, if an architect is hired to, let's say, draft plans to recreate what was there before, that's very different than hiring an architect to design a radically different house, because that process is going to take longer, therefore their fee is higher. So is there also... is there distinction made such that the insurance company says, okay, we're only going to cover the architect's fee for the first 50% of their hours because that's the chunk that would be used to recreate the house. The next 2,000 hours or whatever it is, that's on you, client, because now you're wanting to make changes.
Yes, great question. And the way you kind of laid it out is typically by the letter of the policy how it would be applied. So as part of the insurance company returning the homeowner to the same condition they were in prior to the fire, if that process requires drawings for a set of as-built, a set of plans, set of drawings to present to the authority having jurisdiction to get a building permit, the costs associated with that initial design is what the insurance company would cover. A lot of times the insurance company does not include design fees up front. They say, oh, well, just send us the actual invoice for what's incurred. And that's their way of being able to kind of audit what is actually being spent. Whereas our strategy is, well, hold on a second. If architectural fees are 10 to 12% of construction costs, and we've got a multi-million-dollar house that's going up, who do you think is going to be laying out six figures to pay an architect if the insurance company is not paying it on the front end, right? So our strategy is to get either a quote from an architect or use a percentage, David, like you had mentioned in that ballpark, factor it into the loss settlement on the front end to give our clients the flexibility to go out and hire that architect and not have to worry about fronting and carrying those costs. And even worse, what if an insurance company audits it and says, we're only going to pay you 50% of what you're actually paying, right? The client might be on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, because, through no fault of their own, right? The insurance company said, we'll review it as it's incurred. We incurred it because we had to get started with our project. And now you're telling me you're only going to pay a quarter of what I'm actually spending and you're going to make me fight over the rest? That doesn't seem fair. So, that's why we try to get as much included on the front end as what is owed and measured per the policy on the front end, so the client knows how much they're getting, they know how much they're going to be receiving, they can make strategic decisions with the amount of money that they're going to be getting and try to leave as little variable as possible when it comes to loss settlement.
Is the demonstration of how much something's going to cost, I'm trying to think of what my question is here. Like one of the challenges that we have in our industry, right, is so for a typical project, clients ask, how much is it going to cost for me to build this house? And we're like, I don't know. What are you trying to build?
Right.
I guess in this scenario, right, it's a bit more controlled because it's the parameters from the insurance company side is a like for like description. But I guess my question is that maybe you just answered, but are those numbers having to be established up front, or like typically when we're designing a house, we don't know the construction cost of the house on day one. We don't know it on day 14 or day 30. We don't know until we go through months or maybe a year of design and documentation. And only then do we arrive at, quote, the final price, which obviously goes up during construction most of the time. Mm-hmm. So the point being is that it's much more of an iterative process, and it's a process to understand the scope and costs and all of these things as we go forward. Are there insurance companies that approach it such that they want to just cut one big check at the beginning? And are there insurance companies that do it differently, where they say, okay, let's like keep tabs with each other, keep us informed, and then we'll update also what we're giving you as you go throughout, because you don't really know how much things are going to cost unless you actually go through it.
So yes to all that. So,
it's that complicated. I'm trying to figure out how to ask these questions.
No, but I mean, the answer is really yes to all of that. I mean, in our insurance adjustment world, we know the scope and we know the pricing up front. So that's why we feel comfortable saying, all right, we're going to put in 10%, 12%, 7%, whatever it actually is for architectural and engineering based on the amount of this project and the amount of this job. That's why we think we have credibility when we present it to the insurance company and say, pay this now. You don't have to worry about variable. You don't have to worry about them making different selections or choosing different materials or bumping out the back and putting on an addition, because they didn't have that before, right? If they're going back like for like, it should cost X amount of this in order to get plans, get drawings, get a construction set for permitting. So that's our argument as far as why we need it, on the front end. And yeah, I mean, settlements take all different shapes and sizes depending on many circumstances: the insurance company, the needs of the client, the adjuster, how busy they are, the time of year it is. We've settled claims in all different ways. Some insurance companies, to your point, David, want to write one big check in the front and then say, goodbye, do with it what you want, we're out of here. Other insurance companies want to write, settle it partially or settle it on an actual cash value basis, which is the depreciated amount up front. And many policies have this language where, clients have replacement cost coverage, but the loss is settled actual cash value up front. So because State Farm is paying you a new roof for your old roof, and that roof was 10 years old, they're holding back a percentage of the value of the new roof until that work is actually completed. So in those sort of situations, there is holdback that would be due at the completion of the repairs, along with any open items such as architectural and engineering that may be paid, or permitting costs that might be paid by the insurance company as incurred. So we see settlements, all different ways, all different shapes and forms.
Are there insurance companies that over-insure? I'm thinking specifically, private property houses is where my mind is. Are there companies that over-insure as opposed to under?
Intentionally or unintentionally, right?
I suppose unintentionally, right? I mean, because there are good ones and bad ones, so we hear. And I'm just wondering when a company, quote, over-insures or is of a great benefit to the homeowner, if that process is different when there's more money at stake from the insurance side.
So what we tell clients is, look, if you had a $10 million insurance policy on your 2,000 square foot house, the insurance company's not just going to pay you $10 million because that's how much coverage you had, right? You have to prove your loss. So, ultimately, it doesn't matter how much coverage if an insurance company over-insures a house intentionally or unintentionally, that doesn't necessarily matter if the loss and damage is only measured at X and it's not up to the limit. I mean, I know just, for me personally, when I went through my recent renewal for my home in Maryland, the insurance company wrote X amount, they came out and did an inspection, and then they reduced it slightly to Y amount because they said, hey, you don't need to carry this much insurance. We'll refund a piece of your premium, yada, yada. So, diligent insurance companies take those sort of underwriting steps and make sure that the assets that they have in their book are properly insured. Not every insurance company does that. Not every time. Things obviously slip through the cracks. And but to your question about it impacting the adjustment, it really would not impact the adjustment.
Gotcha. Specific question. In our space, again, we're used to hearing the construction cost as a cost per square foot. It's not a great way to it's not a very accurate, form of metric, but it's something. And we're also used to hearing, of architects' fees as a percentage of construction costs. In your space, are those also general metrics used? Like, are you guys, is it a cost per square foot? And also, I would assume the construction costs you guys have outlined for different, must be radically different depending on the location. Like building in LA is way more expensive than building in, Idaho.
Absolutely, yes. So, the industry standard softwares that are out there that most of the insurance companies use, they are based on region. So to your point, if you're building in Los Angeles versus building in Idaho versus building in New York or Maryland or Florida, it's drastically different based on the market and based on the region. So that does certainly get taken into consideration when you are writing an estimate or when you are, preparing a loss measure for clients. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Would there be an advantage? And I'm thinking that, the Palisades has a very strong communities, like people are really like, close to each other. Would there be a benefit for, let's say, neighbors to hire the same public adjuster, to work out their claims, or not so much if they have different insurance companies?
I mean, if the whole neighborhood wanted professional representation to make sure that themselves and their neighbors were being treated fairly by their insurance company and receiving all that they're entitled to for their years of paying insurance premiums for the time that they actually need it, absolutely. I mean, could there be a situation where you hire a public adjuster, your claim moves at a certain speed, you're getting a check, you're getting ready to rebuild, and your neighbor who doesn't is still kind of haggling with or can't get their adjuster on the phone because he's based out of Texas and he was only in California for 2 weeks and now he's back, and they switched the person 3 times on you. Sure, could that get frustrating? Yes. I mean, there's no, tangible benefit where I could say, yeah, you're 30% better by all of you guys hiring us. But to the extent that we want to help out, and we do help out, as many people, as we possibly can, and making sure that neighborhoods and communities are being served and are being taken care of when they need it the most. It's what we do. It helps us sleep well at night knowing that we're doing good. We're helping people. We truly feel like we are not that there's a bad guy, but that we are the good guys. Really helping to make sure that people's homes, people's lives, people's children have a roof over their head. Their business is back up and running as quickly as possible to help support the family and support the employees and support their families. So you do kind of feel good sitting where we sit on our side of the table, helping people the way we do.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. I was also thinking people who want to rebuild, but not on the lot where the loss occurred. Could the insurance still help them rebuild elsewhere, or are you tied to rebuild where the loss has occurred?
Great question. And it depends on what your policy says. So that's why, very important. We got to read the policy. You got to review the coverages. You got to see what it says. Some policies do allow you for your family to permanently relocate elsewhere after an event of this nature and still recover, for the most part, the majority of the insurance coverages and benefits that are available to you. Other policies specifically speak to, rebuilding at the residence premises or rebuilding at the same location, where it could kind of limit you to rebuilding, at the same property. So it really just depends on what the policy says and what the coverages say.
And if, let's say, I'm thinking of selling the lot on which my house used to be, should I be wrapping up all my claims with my insurance before I do that, or can I sell that property and concurrently, keep working on the claims?
It's depending on the coverages, and if you can and if you are able to do that, then you absolutely should do that. If you've got the ability to do it, and then continue working with your insurance company on the personal property, or continue working with the insurance company for any holdback or monies that could be recovered by permanently relocating elsewhere. Yeah, you should explore both.
Okay.
Is it, I know you said it varies depending on the insurance company, but is it most common for an insurance company to cut a big check at the very beginning in the case of a house and then just be done with it? And like you said, do whatever you want with that money because now we're settled.
So that's kind of the insurance company strategy, is to write what they feel like they owe, cut a check reflective of what they feel that we owe, and turn it over to the client to get the work done. And then if you have a supplement, or if your contractor says you need plans and permits, then just let us know and let us know and let us know. Well,
that's difficult to do though.
When the train is leaving the station and the momentum is going, you're going to stop construction and bring out an adjuster, get an answer on this, that, and the other. It's a lot more complicated, right? So, we always advise when we get involved with our clients, we advocate for them to, accept undisputed partial payments from insurance companies along the way. So, State Farm might issue that initial lump sum check based on what they think they owe. And as long as it's not full and final, that can be accepted as an undisputed partial payment without prejudice against the overall claim recovery. And then we can continue working on saying, hey, that's well and good. Thanks for that check. But guess what? You're missing another $800,000 worth of scope items
Right,
that we
right.
still need to adjust and work out. And a lot of clients and a lot of homeowners, have mortgage companies that are listed on dwelling checks as a fact of them, the insurance company having an insurable interest in the property, and they're named and listed in the policy. So, the sooner that you could, alert your lender that you had a fire, that you had a loss, you're going through the insurance adjustment process, to have the lender and their loss draft department let the client know what information is going to be needed so that the mortgage company can either sign off on the check or put the funds in escrow and fund the reconstruction in draws based on certain progress markers. The sooner that the homeowner can learn what is going to be needed from their specific lender, because it varies lender to lender, the better off it'll be, just so that they're prepared to have and help, gather as much information as needed to turn that funding process on as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I'm understanding even more and more why it makes sense to have you onboarded, let's say, as early as possible. It's the same, it's the same thing as we've spoken with a number of owners representatives, and they're like, bring us on soon. We can always come on later, but if there are problems that have occurred, like foundationally in the structure of the team or whatever else, it's really hard to go backward, to your point. Another thing I was wondering is the ideal client working relationship for you the situation where they are only speaking to you and you are the only one speaking with the insurance company? Or do you have clients who are like, well, I'd like to also email the insurance adjuster directly without you CC'd on it to find out information on my own? I feel like that's not a great way to handle all the communication, but I'm sure you come across clients who are wanting to
be involved,
to be involved to that degree or in that manner.
Right. I mean, we would certainly caution against that, right? I mean, there should be one voice on the claim, and that should be the voice of the public adjuster when we're involved. You don't want the insurance company shopping opinions. Oh, let me ask Zach this, but let me ask the client that, or having the client convey information that could unintentionally impact their claim by not running it by us first, or by, just speaking out of turn. A lot of times we find our clients, when they're having a conversation with an insurance company, they think they're talking to the police. They just start word vomiting, and it's like, they asked you, were you home? Yes or no? They don't need to know, a 5-minute answer on all of your activities throughout the week before the fire. It's just a yes or no answer, so that type of thing, we would certainly caution against. And, that's, we have kind of a tried and true method. Our company's been around for 80 years. We get great results for our clients. We have a tried and true method that helps our clients achieve those goals. Now, that doesn't mean we can't, be flexible and amend our process to meet our clients' needs. But, for the most part, certainly letting your public adjuster handle the communication with the insurance company and be the primary conduit for communication back and forth between the sides leads to the most effective outcome.
Yeah, the conduit. That makes complete sense. And I also really appreciate your point that if, in my example, if a client sends an email or a text message or a phone call and reaches out to the insurance adjuster directly, that's now opened up a bridge. So that person has I wouldn't say the right, but has the idea that they can also reach out directly to the client. And we've had that on our side too. We've had clients do that. I'm like, don't do that, because you're just confusing. It's confusing everybody, right?
Right.
And
It's
now
not
you've
about
opened up
hiding.
yourself.
Right. It's not about hiding the ball or wanting to stay in control. It's literally just a protection method. There are clients where I forward them every single communication with the insurance company. If it's, hey, let's meet at 10 instead of 10:30, they want to see it. And I have no problem sharing, our file is an open book. Ultimately it's the client's claim. We're helping to service that claim, manage that claim. But, they're the ones on the policy. They're the ones paying the premium, and they're the ones that suffered the loss. But, there are certainly certain things that we strongly recommend against, and opening up, that line of communication could lead to unintended issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
The police interrogation makes me laugh.
I was wondering, yeah, well, no, but it's like, I mean, it's like us for building permits. They don't need to know everything. They just need to know what they're interested in, which is, meeting building code and nothing else. The more information you give, sometimes the more detrimental it could be. So
Unless they want it. And
unless they
some
ask for
clients,
it,
they want to be involved in everything.
Yeah. I was wondering, if a client decides to go with a cash settlement, how is that being calculated? Is it again based on the limit of the policy and the estimated value of the home, and also who is estimating the value of the home? Because as we know, the value of real estate is also like a wide range, right?
Yeah, and if it's not you guys, and because you have an estimator, sister company, or however you phrase it, if someone's not working with an adjuster or through a company, I guess clients are going out and just finding the professionals on their own, and that's how
or they're taking the insurance company's word for it, right? I mean, Nationwide is on your side. You're in good hands with Allstate, right? I mean, seriously, a lot of people think that, I've been insured with Chubb. My grandfather knew Mr. Chubb. It doesn't matter. When it comes to a claim, you're a number in a file. It's a business transaction. It boils down to kind of those cold hard facts. So, when clients don't have professional representation, they're in a position where either they're taking the insurance company's word for it, or to the point that we were talking about earlier, they're going out to contractors and can get wildly different pricing for a similar scope. So it's hard to know, who to trust, who's got my best interest. And that's where it kind of comes back down to even our compensation package with our clients is like, look, our interests are aligned. The more you get, the more I get. Yeah. We're in this together. I'm not you. So, we find the clients, especially in the front when you don't have that sort of, earned trust. It's like, hey, look, you don't have to trust me, but just look at the dollars and cents, right? It's in both of our interests to move this thing forward and move it in a certain way. And then you kind of build that trust over time. But, getting back to your question about the cash settlement. So that would essentially be based on, number one, I know I sound like a broken record, but it really depends on the coverages and what the policy says, number one. And then number two, how we value and measure the loss and damage versus how the insurance company does that. And, ultimately it becomes a negotiation, right? That first, Allstate or State Farm's first go at it is not going to be their last go for the most part, right? So they cut that first initial check knowing that there's going to be either more adjustment to be made with us, or there would be, when we're not involved, there might be a supplement down the road. It's just based on the information they have at the time and based on what they feel like they owe under the terms and conditions of the policy at that time based on the information that they have available.
So if they've given me a big check for the loss of my home, there is a potential chance that there could be some more money added to that check later on? Or is that kind of it, like, they paid and that's it?
Right.
If there's more coverage available, absolutely, there could be more.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why you need to, once again, read the policy, consult with a professional like a public adjuster to really just make sure that your interests are being protected and you're not leaving money on the table in a business transaction such as this.
Actually, it's an interesting point. When people are purchasing coverage, home insurance, would it make sense to call you guys and be like, hey, can you take a look at my policy? Let me know if I should, tack on a few other things, or if this sounds reasonable?
So to be clear, we are only public adjusters. We're not, risk consultants or policy. And so want to make sure that that's very clear. We're only public adjusters, but, for trusted, for friends and family and clients that we have that built-in trust when it comes to renewal time. It's like, hey, Zach, we just got our policy renewed. Can you take a peek at it and let me know if anything sticks out to you? As a courtesy, we absolutely do. Yes.
Gotcha. And since tax day was yesterday, I was wondering, if you do get money from the insurance, is that money being taxed or absolutely not?
So it depends, right? And, we recommend that anyone listening to this consults with their tax professional.
Of course.
But typically, when you sustain a homeowner's loss, dwelling and personal property proceeds, since you sustained a loss, are typically not taxed. On commercial side, reconstruction of the building, business, personal property, typically not taxed. The only piece that could be subject to that would be loss of income business interruption coverage
Of
because
course,
it's
yeah.
helping to make up for the income you would have generated. So that piece of the puzzle may be subject to tax depending on the jurisdiction and where you guys live. So, we would recommend, consulting with a tax professional once those checks come in, just to make sure that you're, prepared for any sort of liabilities that might come your way.
What I don't know if you can answer this specifically. If not, it's fine. But I'm wondering what kinds of numbers are you guys seeing for the reconstruction of, let's say, again, the hypothetical, typical 3,000 square foot house. Like, what is the cost of rebuilding something like that was built originally in the late 80s? Are you guys seeing like
in LA, you mean?
In LA, yeah, specifically. Are you guys seeing like $1,000 a square foot?
800, 1,000. I mean, we're
Okay.
seeing it.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, a client sent me a contract recently where, the builder who, has his own, what do you call it? He's got his own framing yard and for lumber yard for framing and for those type of
Wow.
materials, still being quoted 800 plus
Yeah.
850 a foot.
Yeah.
So we are certainly seeing things, in that neighborhood. And, look, it takes the insurance company a little bit of sticker shock to get to those numbers. I mean,
Yeah, I understand.
and I mean, look,
Yeah.
even in non-LA fires, I mean, when we do work in Manhattan and in the Hamptons and in, the high rent zip codes around the country, a lot of times insurance company adjusters are like, what are you, excuse me? How much is it going to be? It's like, look, you insured it. You know where the house is located. It's located in Southampton, right? I mean, what do you think? This is a skyscraper in Lower Manhattan. What do you mean? It's good. This is how much it, but so once again, having those conversations with the insurance company on the front end, helping to get their view of the loss in line with our view of the loss on the front end helps to kind of ease those concerns and try to make that friction or the discrepancies we have on the back end a little bit more palatable if you can kind of help set the tone from the start.
Yep, totally. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that because those are the numbers we're seeing as well, for sure. And if you're doing a house in one of these places you've described and it's ultra custom, then you're easily double that figure, of course. But these numbers, even the $850 per square foot or $1,000 a square foot, which is a common metric that we hear, it freaks people out. And I understand it because if you try and visualize $1,000 per 12 by 12 inch, tile, right. It's crazy, but that's just what the prices are these days.
And actually, that's an interesting question too, because let's say somebody wants to rebuild now, they got an estimate from a contractor, the price is about $850 a square foot, but the house needs to be designed, detailed, drawn, permitted, and construction won't start for another 2 years. Therefore, the price per square foot by then would have gone up. Would the insurance adjust the estimated amount of money that was going to be disbursed, or are they going to be like, no, we're going to pay what was estimated 2 years ago?
That's a great question. And, it depends on the insurance company and it depends on the situation and the circumstances. A lot of times in non-wildfire LA Palisade situations, the insurance company uses the price listing from the month and year of the loss to help them measure. Now, we then, we especially saw it during COVID when building materials, the lumber prices, remember that whole thing where the lumber was going through the roof and every client was asking us, well, are you going to be putting in a factor for, increased lumber? And the answer is yes. And clients are asking us now, especially last week when it comes to the tariffs, right? How are we going to be factoring in the building in the tariffs into our number? And the answer is, look, it depends on the insurance company. Allstate's going to laugh at that if we put in a tariff contingency of 20%, right? But some of the other insurance companies might not because they get it and they understand that things, are going to be going up and they're going to be fluctuating. And if you're going to put someone back to the way they were before, you have to factor in those elements that kind of come into play.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing it. I know you know this, but we're seeing it too, even with quotes or estimates from, window manufacturers. There's a line at the bottom that says additional 15% might, take place in the next 6 months or a year. And that's part of this estimate because of the tariffs. And it's there from the supplier directly. Right.
When an estimate used to be good for 30 days, now it's like this estimate is good
days.
for 4 days and then it's subject to a revision. I mean,
exactly.
It's brutal. It's brutal. A similar question to what was talked about before. I think in the very beginning of the conversation, you had said something along the lines of if the insurance company is providing their own or recommending an architect or engineer that they are specifying, that it still makes sense for the client to find their own professionals on their side, either on their own or with the help of a public adjuster like yourself. I guess the question is, I don't know what the question. I guess the question is like, is it difficult or weird to have two, in some ways, architects on competing teams have to talk to each other, or maybe to have somehow decide which architect is the actual architect to be used, or the actual engineer to be used, or the structural engineer inspector for inspecting foundations, which is something we've heard of. Like the insurance company sends out their own person. And it's like, well, why you should probably use someone local and not someone who's flying out from a different place. So, yeah.
I wouldn't say it's awkward. I would say it's more just about being protected and making sure that whomever is rendering an opinion can stand behind that. It's like, to your point, if you have a loss in California and you're flying in an architect from Chicago, is that architect from Chicago or that engineer going to stamp the plans to present to the county and put their professional seal and professional liability behind saying that you can, temporarily shore up this piece of the wall and it doesn't need to come down? Most of the time, the answer to that is no. And a lot of times when it comes to, bridging a gap or saying, hey, one guy is saying this, one gal is saying that, how do we, a lot of times it comes down to, well, who's actually doing this? Who's going to put their stamp on the plans? Who's going to put their professional liability behind it? And if, Travelers is bringing in an engineer who can't stand behind it, well, then how can we stand behind what they're saying? And,
Sure.
It's very easy to throw a theoretical concept out there, and it's a little bit more challenging to stand behind it. And, that's where a lot of times we have success is either, recommending to our client an architect or an engineer, or utilizing the client's, architect and engineer that they have a relationship with to help, bring them in when necessary, render an opinion and say, hey, look, this is going to be the architect of record. This is the engineer of record. You're going to go against what this person is saying. So, that's one way that we can kind of help, bridge that gap but, putting the two in a room together and say, hey guys, we're on a Zoom, you guys hash this out and come back to us with one recommendation. You're the professional with the letters after your name. You tell us what it is. That has worked too in the past.
It's funny because as we're talking through this, I just realized that, for us, we mostly do, new houses and a lot of remodels. I don't think to date I've ever done in my entire career a project where it's a true like for like rebuild, or offered services that is just that. And most architects don't do just that, right? They're designing like new and cool things, hopefully.
But also clients oftentimes just want to, refresh things up. Like they rarely
in a normal situation.
And most of our clients, to that exact same point, the silver lining when they go through a catastrophic fire or water damage or hurricane is that they do make changes to make it their dream house, or to give them that area that they always wanted. That's not to say that the insurance company is going to pay to do it, but it's an opportunity to make those changes.
Right. The delta won't be covered. In the case where the client wants to put back what was there, maybe not completely like for like, but very, very close to it. So in other words, from an architect's or designer's perspective, there's not like a lot of creative choices being made. Is it hard to find architects who will take on that kind of work and basically bring the old house up to code and just draft it and permit it and do CDs for something they haven't designed?
I mean, our experience is not really. Especially, after these events. And look, our firm, I mean, we specialize in large losses, right? Multi-million-dollar residential and commercial events. So, in those situations, either our clients, have worked with somebody before, or they're working with a design build firm that either has those services in-house or who could recommend an architect that works closely with that particular contractor. So, to the point that they're going back very similarly, we don't really find that to be an issue. Especially, if you might be going back similar, but you still need a set of plans. We had one set of plans that burned up in the fire, right?
Yeah. Where we have a set of plans with the city, but there's like no dimensions on it.
Exactly.
You can't read the dimensions as
Exactly.
microfilm. And then what about the gray area too? I'm thinking about of the design aspects of the house. So again, even if we are building back quote like for like, there might not be enough documentation via photographs, videos, and plans and specifications to say this was exactly what was there before, the type of finish and whatever else, and therefore you need to hire someone to help you figure out what it was, or make a judgment call and say, well, I recommend we choose this type of paint or whatever else. I guess a lot of my questions are circling back to, so how does that conversation go, and how much of that is covered by the insurance when it gets to that gray zone?
So a lot of times clients in a certain, if they've worked with a designer, interior decorator, a designer before, right? And a
Yeah,
lot of times we would say, okay, you were only able to get those lighting fixtures through the designer's contacts, right? Through a
yeah,
specialty market. So, or, the faux paint was picked by this designer through this. We would include design fees in the insurance estimate to recreate what was there. If the client just
gotcha.
can't go out and do it on their own, we will and we can make a case, and we've done it successfully, that the design costs to help recreate what was there prior to the loss are part of the loss and should be covered by the insurance company. Now, we get pushback on that pretty much routinely. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. Sometimes it's a bargaining chip for something else. But you, if a client cannot go out and get what they had on their own, we believe that they're entitled to the assistance that is required in order to, not make a change, just put it back the way it was. It's like, otherwise, how am I supposed to get the same type of paint or fixtures or floor
Yeah,
coverings or
Yeah.
whatever it is?
yeah. Quit your job and now you're a full-time designer or architect.
Well,
Yeah. Okay.
another thing, seriously, is the insurance having a dedicated project manager or site supervisor to ensure that a multi-million-dollar project comes in on time and on budget. You'd be amazed at the amount of insurance companies that say, nope, not going to pay for it. And Dave, to that point,
Really?
they think that a homeowner's full-time job should be overseeing and maintaining the contractor and
That's
the
ridiculous.
sequencing of trades and all
No,
that
no,
sort
no,
of
no,
stuff.
no.
I mean, you know,
That's going to be a nightmare for everybody.
It's gonna,
right.
it's
And once
gonna
again, we're not
cost them
saying
more.
hire a third party owner's rep. We're not saying go
Right.
hire you guys to do it. We're saying the contractor is going to have a dedicated on-site project
Yeah.
manager. Just pay for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a
It'd be
really
cheaper
good
in the
point.
end and not pay for that.
Yeah, it'll be cheaper, probably more cost effective and faster for sure.
Yeah.
But that's a really good point, because it is, it reminds me that in terms of working with contractors and hiring contractors, that site super is like the most critical person, but it's the one that the average individual who doesn't have knowledge of how buildings could go together, they'll overlook it. They're like, well, you have the trades out there doing their thing, and that should be fine, right? No. It's fine if you want to have like a massive headache for about 2 years.
And that's why you're entitled to a general contractor. Insurance settlements have overhead and profit for a general contractor to oversee a job, when there's more
Yeah.
than a certain number of trades, but, for that exact point. But, once again, you'd be amazed at the type of pushback that we get and that our clients get, on those type of expenses, which to your point really saves the insurance company time and money because they're paying for you to live somewhere else while your house is being rebuilt. So if the project
Yeah.
takes an extra 3 months, the insurance company is going to be on the hook for that 3 months, which
Yeah.
theoretically is less expensive than what we're asking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
True.
I was wondering if in your career you have a claim that kind of like stands out as either one that was really tough to fight or one you're really proud of or kind of like one that just, is in your mind.
Wow. So,
I'm sure there
doing
is
this,
many.
yeah, doing this for almost 20 years. I mean, we've kind of, I've seen a lot. I mean, our company, like I said, has been around for 80 years. We've pretty much seen it all, between,
Yeah.
we've got a great staff of adjusters, we think the most experienced team that we can rely on. There's no issue that I would run into that one of my partners hasn't seen before and vice versa. But I will say one interesting one that comes to mind is after Hurricane Sandy, our firm was retained by Amtrak to assist them in their Hurricane Sandy losses, where the train tunnels in between Manhattan and underneath the East River, and
Hmm.
the rivers was completely inundated with floodwaters.
Hmm. Yeah.
And as part of our job on that, we needed to really go into the train tunnels to work with a team of experts to, determine and inspect the damage to the bench walls, the signaling, you name it. And, because these were still fully in service tracks
Yeah.
after the water was pumped out and everything was, kind of made safe initially, we had to go in between 12 a.m. and 5 a.m. because the train traffic was at a minimum. So, that was a very interesting, unique kind of once in a lifetime type of experiences where, you've ridden, as a New Yorker and an East Coast guy, you've ridden through those tunnels so many times, taking it for
Yeah. Yeah.
granted,
Yeah.
walking it was definitely a cool and spooky experience, but, it kind of got old quick, after, 5, 6 times, you're taking a selfie down the tunnel, you're wearing your
Yeah.
hard hat. It's all well and good. But guess what? You worked 12 hours before that. You go home and sleep for
Yeah.
2 hours. Then you work another 12 hours after it. It's a very long day. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
very rewarding, of course. So,
That's amazing. That's amazing. Zach, thanks so much for making the time. The hour and a half went by very quickly. This was incredibly informative. And just thank you. I appreciate it a lot.
of course, thank you guys for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to talking again soon.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail. If you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion, feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.